We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph and Maseches Baba Basra. This is Baba Basra Daf 27a. On the previous Amud Ula said that if a person has a tree that's within 16 amos of the neighbor, so it's considered that the tree is getting nutrients from the neighbor's property, is considered to be like gazela, and therefore it actually results in a leniency that the person is patur from bikurim. And so the Gemara had asked on the previous Amud, where did he get this measurement of 16 amos away? And so now the Gemara is suggesting perhaps it comes from the Mishnah in Shvius, which talks about 3 trees. If you have 3 trees in a base saw, bishvilon. So let's say you have 3 trees that are in a base saw, that's considered to be an orchard, and therefore you're allowed to plow the entire area, bishvilon, because of those 3 trees, because it's considered essentially that they're getting nutrients from all of the property. And so if you do the math, the Gemara says, Kama have lahuna, how much is a base saw? Trei alfi v'hei mea garmidi, it's 2,500 garmidi, which is square amos. L'chol chad kama matile. So if you divide that among the 3 trees, how much does each tree get? How many square amos? The answer is tamni mea utzlosin utzlosa v'tilsa. It's 833 and a third square amos. But the Gemara says akati, but still nefishi le de'ula. Ula says that it was 1,024 square amos. If you do the math from 16 amos in every direction, and so therefore again Ula is saying that the roots extend and get nutrients from further away. And Rashi explains Beisa Kama Havelu, how much is a Beisa? Trei Alfi V'Tov Kuf Garmidi. Again, it's 2,500 square amos, Al Amarochav. Kama Moti L'Chol Chad Mehanach Ilona. So how much is each one of these trees getting? Tuf Lamed Gimel V'Tilsa. Again, that's going to be 833 and a third square amos. Akati Nefishin Lehu Sheish Esrei Amo De'ula to have a Elef V'Chavdala. That's 16 amos of Ula in every direction. That's more because that's 1,024 square amos for each tree. And so the Gemara answers, Lo Duk, Ula was not exacting in his measurement. It's really not exactly 16 amos. Rashi says, Lo Duk Ula, Lo Dikte Kol Kach. He wasn't so careful about the exact amount. Hoel V'Karov L'Shir Zeh, because it's pretty close to this amount. Again, it's a difference between 833 and a third, or 1,024 square amos. So Hoel V'Karov L'Shir Zeh, Ka'amar V'Lo Ich B'Slei. He didn't care to get it precisely. But the Gemara says, 1 second. Eibor Damrin and Lo Duk L'Chumra would make sense if Ula was not exacting, but it resulted in a stringency that Ula was being strict. But here it's actually a leniency, because here he's saying if it's 16 amos away, even though technically that's really not the amount of space, even though it's not really getting any nutrients from the neighbor, it's still going to be patur from bikurim. Lakula lo dak me'amrin. Are you going to say that lakula, it results in a leniency and he wasn't careful, and therefore people are going to be lenient and they're going to say they're not chayiv in bikurim when really they are? That doesn't make sense. Rashi says, Eimor de'amrin and lo dak hecha do'azal l'chumra. It makes sense to say he's not exacting when it results in a stringency. Hacha ka'azal l'kula, but over here it results in a leniency. De'eno yonik kol kach, meaning to say it's not really taking nutrients from so far away. V'kamar iu de'yonik, he's saying it is taking the nutrients. Upater le'mi bikurim. Therefore he's saying that the person is exempt from bikurim. So again, l'kula lo dak mi'amrina. Would we ever say this idea, l'kula, that for a leniency we're saying he's not exact? Would we say that? And so the Gemara answers to that, misavrit beribua ka'amrina. Do you think that we're supposed to measure this as a square? Meaning to say, if you're doing these 16 amos, so are you going to draw a square based on that 16 amos? Of course not. Be'igula ka'amrina, you're actually going to draw it as a circle. That's essentially, that 16 amos is going to be the radius of the circle, and so therefore it actually is a little bit less in terms of square amos. And Rashi explains, misavrit sheish esrei amma de'ula beribua ka'amar. When you do these 16 amos, do you think you draw that as a square? Till I have a shloshim ushtayim alamid beis k'amrina, and then it's 32 by 32, and again you come out with the square amos that we said above. That's not the case over here. Rather, continues Rashi, bigula kamar, we have to draw it as a circle, and again 16 amos is going to be the radius. Shakol sevivav yonik sheish esrei, meaning all around as a circle is going to be 16 amos. That's a radius of 16 amos. V'hainu bigula deilu birubua nimtza keneged holachson yoser misheish esrei am. If you drew it as a square, so then at the diagonal it would actually be more than 16 amos. So obviously it has to be a circle. And so the Gemara now has to do the math and determine how much less square amos is going to be the circle than the square. Mechti, let us see. Kama meruba yoser ala igol. How much is a square larger than a circle? Ravia, it's a quarter. And so if you deduct that amount, pashalu zayin meya veshisin utmanya, you're going to be left with 768. And so 768, that's pretty close to 833 and a third. The Gemara says, Akati pashle pal gadam. So well, still, it would have been a little bit closer if it would have been 16 and a half amos and not say 16 amos. That would have gotten close closer to 833 1/3 square amos. And the Gemara says, well, exactly that. Hainu de lo duck. That's what we mean. He wasn't precise. Ulechumra lo duck. In this direction, it's actually a stringency. It's okay to say that he was not precise in terms of creating a stringency. And one way you can illustrate what the Gemara is saying, that the circle is 1/4 less than the square that surrounds it, is, let's say you have, for example, let's say you have a square and each side of the square is 2, which would essentially mean that the diameter of the circle within the square is also 2. So then in order to calculate the area of the circle, you're going to do pi r squared. If you assume that pi is 3, so then it's going to be 3 times 1. The area of the circle is going to be 3, whereas in the exact same case, again, that square that surrounds the circle, each side is 2, so you do 2 times 2 in order to get the area. That's going to be 4, so that's about a quarter difference between the area of the square and the area of the circle, essentially what the Gemara is saying. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Mishnah Maseches Bikurim. This is a proof in terms of whether it's actually true that a person needs to have 16 amos in every direction around the tree in order to be chayiv in Bikurim. The Mishnah in Bikurim says, Hakone ilan v'karko, if somebody buys a tree and its land, mevi v'kore, so he brings Bikurim and he reads from the Parsha Bikurim when he brings the fruits to the Beis HaMikdash. And so the Gemara says, my lav, is it not kolshu, any amount of land? You don't need to have 16 amos of land in every direction. The Gemara says, lo yud vav amma, no, it really means 16 amos of land in every direction. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here another proof from a Mishnah in Bikurim, kana shnei ilanos besoch shel chavero, if he buys 2 trees among his friend's property, mevi ve'eno kore, so then he brings the Bikurim, but he doesn't read the Parsha in that case. So the Gemara infers, hashlosha mevi v'kore, let's say he buys 3 trees, so then apparently he would bring the Bikurim and he would also read from the Parsha. And again, my lav, is it not kol shehu, any amount of land? Again, seems to be against Ula. And the Gemara says, lo no, hachanami yud vavama, here also it's 16 amos. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here another proof. This is a Mishnah Maseches Peah. Rabbi Akiva says, karka kol shehu chay bepeah uve Bikurim v'chosun ala pruzbal, any amount of karka person is chayiv in peah and Bikurim. Bikurim is relevant to what we're discussing. And also any amount of karka, any amount of land is enough to write a pruzbal. And Rashi explains, hakona shnei ilanos besoch shel chavero mevi ve'eno kore. Again, it said if he buys 2 trees within his friend's property, he does bring the Bikurim, but he doesn't read from the Parsha. L'kamon tanan b'hamocher sasfina. Later on, we'll learn in the Mishnah, hamocher shtei ilanos lechavero, that if somebody sells 2 trees to his friend, v'lo pirish lo karka, but doesn't say explicitly he's selling him land as well, lo kana karka, so he doesn't acquire land, and the reading of the Parsha is determined by acquiring the land. Aval kana shalosha kana karka, but if he buys 3 trees, he does acquire the land. V'afal pi shelo pirish, even though that was not made explicit. Hilkach gabe Bikurim nami shtei ilanos mevi ve'eno kore. So therefore, by Bikurim as well, when you buy 2 trees, you don't have any land, you just have the trees, so you bring the Bikurim, but you don't read from the Parsha. The lo matzi l'meimar prihu adama asher nasat ali, since he doesn't own the land, he can't say the part of the Parsha which says prihu adama, the fruits of the ground which were given to me, because he doesn't actually own the land. And so the Gemara then said, hagimel, but let's say he buys 3 trees to kana karka, where then he is acquiring the land, so mevi v'kore, so then he in fact brings the Bikurim and he reads as well. And Rashi continues with regards to pruzbul. A pruzbul is written in order to allow a lender to collect even after the Shemitah year, that Shemitah should not cancel the loan. What does that have to do with owning land? Rashi explains, V'amrinan hasam, we say over there in Maseches Gittin, ein kosven pruzbul el al karka. You only write a pruzbul if the borrower has land. Avalein lo karka lelova lo kasvinan le. If the borrower does not have land, you don't write a pruzbul. The halvada lo shchichi, that's an uncommon kind of loan. The mistama ein adam somech el al karka halova. When a lender lends money, in general, he's relying on the land that the borrower has to collect if the borrower shouldn't be able to pay. So if he has no land, lo tikin hillel pruzbul, Hillel never instituted pruzbul in that case. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis.